Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. And today, I've got a build in mind that I wanted to share. It is a build that is designed as something beginner friendly for the new upcoming 3.7 Legion expansion, but also something that can scale quite considerably as you acquire better and better gear over the course of the Legion League. The Legion Gem information has launched, and with it is information on all of the different gems that are being transformed in the update. One of the most exciting changes is what's happening to Cyclone. Now, this isn't new news. We knew that Cyclone was going to be insane because this gem had been leaked earlier. Cyclone's being transformed into a channeling skill, and that is going to cause it to have a few new unique functions. Firstly, it can be used with a powerful infused channeling support gem, something that wasn't an option previously when it was just an attack and movement skill. Secondly, it's gaining a large amount of added attack physical damage. You'll see there's 56 to 85 added attack physical damage at level 20. Not necessarily quite that much at lower levels, but you'll reach level 20 gems in a reasonable time frame in a new league. Thirdly, it's gaining the ability to interact with the very powerful improvements to the Impale mechanic. Impale is something that can support any attack skill and that grants a 40% chance to inflict Impale on enemies when it hits, and also increases the effect of Impale. I went into the Impale mechanics a bit more in my Impale focused champion build, but just to say that what this will do in practice is give 90% of your, if you follow this build, 90% of your attacks will impale enemies, and each impale will cause the next 5 hits to deal 37. Oh, sorry, will cause the next 5 hits to deal 17.4% more damage than they otherwise would. All told, this works out as an average of 37% more damage per hit when you succeed in impaling, which is 33.3% more damage overall. Now, 33.3% more damage overall would not be worth a support gem, but it also comes with 15% more physical damage on attacks as well. All told, this winds up as 53.33% more physical damage for no drawback, except for the fact that you're taking about 5 nodes on the passive tree. For comparison, one of the best support gems for Cyclone currently is Concentrated Effect, which adds 54% more damage, but comes at a very serious cost of a considerable drawback, a decrease in the area of effect of the skill, which is a huge drawback on Cyclone. It's a manageable drawback, and it's one that's and the skill is so powerful that you generally take it, but it's one that is a very meaningful drawback. So we're going to be making use of the Impale mechanic, just as we did on the Impale champion earlier. Now, what skills are we going to be using? We're going to be using the new Cyclone, and we're going to be linking it to Impale support, and also to any subset of the following: melee physical damage, concentrated effect, fortify, maim, infused channeling. I'm going to leave the decision as to which subset of those up to you. You can vary that based upon your access to 6-link armor and weapons. Early in a league, in particular, you will be better off using a 6-link than a 5-link, even if the 5-link has better colors. So you can be a bit more flexible by just using whichever 4 of those you're able to. Before you can get access to a 6-link, by all means, just use a smaller number of them. So Cyclone and Impale are the ones that you always use, and then any subset of melee physical damage, concentrated effect, maim, fortify, and infused channeling. We may also want to consider rage support. I'm leaving this one off because whilst it is very powerful, I'm just not certain how well it will work in practice. I've got a feeling it may actually be one of the most powerful support gems that's being added in the Legion expansion, but I want to test it personally before I recommend it to players. However, it's on my radar as something that might be good. Now, let's jump across to the actual character build and have a look at why we are going Slayer. In the Slayer Ascendancy, what we're going to be taking the Overwhelm node. This sets the base critical strike chance for attacks with weapons to 8%. This means that we can use weapons that have bad baseline critical strikes, like the Vaal Axe or the Despot Axe, both of which are powerful damage-dealing weapons that have pretty piss-poor base critical strike of 5%. Or you can use other ones as well. Overwhelm also grants us more critical strike multiplier. If you've watched my video on the fundamentals of builds and critical strike, you'll get a sense as to how highly I regard critical strike as a stat. And also it has a very powerful defense built in. Nearby enemies have minus 30% to critical strike multiplier. In practice, this means that enemies will not be able to crit you for more damage. They will still be able to, if they crit you, they'll deal 100% baseline damage, but they will still inflict freezes, burns, and the like on you. So you'll suffer all the ailments of a crit, but you will not suffer the increased damage. On maps that have the mod, enemies have increased critical strike chance and critical strike multiplier. This will basically negate that mod. And that's because monsters have a baseline critical strike multiplier of 130%. Now, we're also taking Endless Hunger. We can't afford, unfortunately, to go to Brutal Fervor, despite Brutal Fervor being a very powerful node. We're only taking Endless Hunger from this tree, which gives us immunity to stun and to bleed while leeching, and ensures that effectively we are always leeching unless we are at full life. Being immune to stun while leeching is incredibly powerful. It means that basically when we're not at full life, unless we've been knocked to, say, half-life by a single hit that stuns us, as long as we're not at full life, we're unable to be stunned. I think this is going to be a powerful node on its own. If it turns out that I'm wrong, and this is not the powerful node that I think it is, you can always end up taking Impact instead, or changing around the build a bit to use Masterful Form. We're then going to take the entirety of the Bane of Legends tree. This gives us considerable benefits. Firstly, immunity to reflected physical damage is amazing. It allows us to run any map mods we desire. More damage against unique enemies is fantastic. 10% more damage if you've killed recently, even better. This is just pure offense, and it's a very concentrated form of pure offense. Next up we have Bane of Legends. This node is incredible. Kill enemies that have 20% or lower life when hit by your skills. This means that if you need to kill an enemy that's got 20,000 hit points, you only need to do 16,000 damage to it. Functionally, this is a 25% more multiplier to your damage. It's an absolutely incredible node. It's even better than that in party play, when you're able to target specific monsters that have low hit points and be the one that gets a killing blow. That alone would make this node a compelling and in fact an excellent choice. But then, gain 20% increased attack speed for 20 seconds when you kill a rare or unique enemy. That's a lot of extra attack speed. It's not going to be up all the time, but it will be up a lot of the time in mapping. Next up, gain 20% increased movement speed for 20 seconds when you kill an enemy. One of the most powerful defenses in the game is movement speed. And also, it's very effective in terms of just getting more currency quickly. You can close the gaps to the next pack of monsters quicker, and then kill them quicker, and potentially kill them while you're still leeching from the last pack. So for that reason, very happy with what the Slayer Ascendancy offers. If it turns out that you get a weapon that has close to 8% baseline crit already, by all means drop Overwhelm and spec into Brutal Fervor. Brutal Fervor is an excellent node, and you know there's just so many things that you can do in the Slayer Ascendancy. There's just so much good stuff in there. Next up, the rest of the passive tree focuses on, you notice that there's a fair number of axe-specific nodes. You don't necessarily need to stick to axes. I built this with axes because the other build that I made was focused on swords. However, there is no reason you need to feel locked to axes. If you would prefer to use mauls, by all means use mauls. If you prefer to use swords, by all means use swords. If you prefer to use one-handed weapons, that's fine too, but you will need to unspec this cluster here and take this cluster and one additional travel node in order to make it work. That is, yeah, I'm just making sure that that is the correct 2-weapon fighting node. And you'll need to respec out of any of the 2-handed specific nodes, such as the 2-handed leech nodes that... Oh no, I didn't take them on this build. Of note, there are a number of nodes that are specific to Impale. There is the Forceful Skewering cluster, and there is the Swift Skewering cluster. These are very powerful, and I suggest that you definitely take them. Impale feels to me to be a little bit overpowered. I've left the dual sockets blank on the tree at the moment. Additionally, I do intend to make a path of building download available for this character, but right now that's not possible because I'm not able to fill in all the information. You'll see that the damage output is pretty low, and that's because I can't use the support gems that I want, partly because Impale support is not built in as yet. So let's talk skill links. Your primary skill is Cyclone, and we're going to link that to Impale, Melee Physical, and then any 4 or less of Melee Physical, Concentrated Effect, Maim, Fortify, Infused Channeling, and Rage. And time will tell which is best, but please feel free to experiment with any subset of those. There's actually not much need for other skills because Cyclone is a movement skill that deals damage all the time. However, we want some form of gap traverser or closer skill, and I believe that Leap Slam is the best choice here. However, by all means, try to experiment with others. Your chest can be Calm's Heart. If it's not, I think one option that you've got that's very powerful is to have a more defensive second Cyclone for utility purposes. That is, so where your primary Cyclone is intended just to deal as much damage as possible, your secondary Cyclone will use other supports that are oriented around keeping you safe rather than damaging the enemies. So as an example here, you might use Cyclone connected to faster attacks, life gain on hit, and power charge on critical strikes. Or you could use Cyclone connected to curse on hit, enfeeble, and one of life gain on hit or knockback. If this is in your chest slot, you could potentially even use both of these configurations at once. So you could have Cyclone, faster attacks, life gain on hit, power charge on critical strikes, and enfeeble, and curse on hit, enfeeble, all in one. You're going to want to fit a golem in your build somewhere, and I believe the ice golem is the strongest choice. However, in the labyrinth, you may wish to use the stone golem, especially if you're not that familiar with the labyrinth. But for general mapping, general play, I think the ice golem is the best choice. It provides you both accuracy, which you need, and critical strikes, which you need. You're going to want to use Blood Rage. Blood Rage is a phenomenal skill. It's always been great. It provides even more leech than you as a Slayer get. And it provides you a Frenzy Charge source. Frenzy Charges are your friend. You want them. They're great. You'll also want to have a source of power charges. I mentioned that you can use a second Cyclone with power charge on critical strike. Another option is using Doedre's Elixir as a flask. I term this flask the Bleach Flask. When you drink it, it's a mana flask. It's a pretty low tier mana flask and it's a unique item. When you drink this flask, you lose 20% of your energy shield and you take chaos damage equal to 10% of your life, hence me terming it Bleach. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to make you very sick if you drink it, and you shouldn't do so. It will also give you 1 endurance charge, 1 frenzy charge, and 1 power charge. While mapping, you should be able to kill enough monsters to recharge your bleach flask before the power charge runs out. And so this allows you to build up a rhythm where you're killing monsters faster and faster and faster. You're also going to want to have a guard skill of some description. I recommend Steel Skin while at low gear level, but then when you've got extraordinary gear, consider transitioning to Val Molten Shell as your guard skill. These guard skills are a powerful defensive move that you can fire off when you sense a big telegraphed attack that you can't get out of. The other option, of course, is Immortal Call. Immortal Call has been reworked completely in 3.7. It used to be something that people tended to trigger. They'd attach to cast when damage taken. But nowadays, I think you're actually better off using it as a skill you cast manually. And when a dangerous attack is coming in and going to hit you, At that point, fire off a Mortal Coil and it will provide you an extraordinary amount of defense. It will consume all of your endurance charges, provide you a short-lived, extraordinary amount of defensive power, and then it will go away and you'll be in danger again. So yeah, that's going to come down to personal preference and experimentation. For starters, I suggest start with Steel Skin, experiment with Vile Molten Shell, experiment with Normal Molten Shell, and experiment with Immortal Coil, work out which one works best for you, and stick to it. It's a personal choice. As far as auras, we are going to be using the new Pride aura because the new Pride aura is extraordinarily powerful. So I'm just going to bring up that aura so that you can see it. And what it does, it affects enemies. It doesn't affect friends like most auras do. It affects enemies, so it's, in that sense, it's sort of like a blasphemy curse. Nearby enemies take at least 19% more physical damage. That on its own would be a compelling aura to use. Not necessarily one you definitely use, but it would be a compelling choice. This raises up to 39% as they stay in the aura for up to 4 seconds. So I'm going to assume, we don't have the exact mechanics of how this skill works, but I'm going to assume that each 0.2 seconds it increases by 1%. This is an incredible amount of damage that you're getting from an aura. It's basically, I think it's actually better than old Hatred before the recent changes. Like Hatred on a purely physical build was a very powerful aura, and it was changed in 3.6 to be more useful to cold spellcasters at the expense of being less useful to pure physical builds. New Pride, I think, is going to be stronger than old Hatred was for pure physical builds. It looks extraordinarily good, and I strongly recommend that you take it. In terms of Heralds, I recommend that you either don't use one, or that you use Herald of Purity and link it to Blind Support. Blind Support is extraordinarily good between its very low mana multiplier and the fact that if you attach it to Herald of Purity, the Sentinels that are summoned by Herald of Purity will inflict blindness on hit. You're going to be summoning a lot of those, and that's going to cause a little army to follow you around, blinding all of your enemies, and it ends up being a not inconsequential defensive layer. It's not as good as always being under the effect of a Stibnite Flask, but it's not all that much worse either. So that's a very real option for a semi-defensive layer, and Herald of Purity does add a small amount of extra damage as well. Alternately, if you don't want to go that route, then you can instead pick up a Banner of War, which adds accuracy to your, accuracy for you, and then when you plant it in the ground, gives you a brief surge of adrenaline, adrenaline being one of the most powerful combat buffs in the game. Or alternately, you can use a Dread Banner, which grants you more Impale chance, and if you go with the Dread Banner route, you may not actually need every single Impale node that I selected on the tree. It also lowers enemy accuracy and provides Fortify when planted. However, I prefer the War Banner because of the increased synergies with critical strikes, of providing accuracy, and the fact that some of the Dread Banner's bonuses feel a bit wasted. Anyways, that's all I've got on the Cyclone Slayer. This is a build I'm seriously considering using as my own league starter. If you decide to go this route, you're going to need to roll your own physical weapons. I'm going to make a video on this in the future because rolling physical weapons is a very important part of building a powerful character, and it's something that can be done in very inefficient ways. But it doesn't need to be as expensive as people think it is. Obviously, creating a masterpiece item is never going to be cheap, but creating a very serviceable item can be. Additionally, you can slightly modify this build if you want to fit Starforge in, and Starforge is an extraordinarily good weapon. If you've got any questions, so fire away below. Otherwise, have a good one.